We'll now move to a second round of questions. I'll begin by recognizing myself for 5 minutes. I want to return to Mr. Gates' question about key allies in the AI competition. You all mentioned, our most obvious allies. I mean, I think you're right. I'm not detracting from that answer. Five Eyes, NATO, EU. I'd like to invoke Jared Cohen's concept of sort of geopolitical swing states, perhaps countries that may not fit neatly within the free world paradigm. What are the emerging AI superpowers that we may not be thinking about, or let's just say states that punch above their weight when it comes to AI that we need to be cultivating and ensuring they're not Finlandizing in the Chinese Communist Party direction? I'll start with you, Mr. Wang.
I do think it's really important, as AI sort of promises to be one of the most important technologies, both economically and militarily. There are a myriad of countries that are all getting involved. Kind of as I mentioned, the UAE has a very dedicated effort towards artificial intelligence. They've open source models. They're continuing that series of developments towards building bigger and more powerful AI models. We don't know if they're going to open source them, but we'll see. I think it's important that as they develop those, that we try as hard as we can to make sure those follow our principles and our governance regimes. India is another key country, obviously, very critical when we think about geopolitical allies. But also as you think about their developments in AI, they have an incredibly active tech sector, and they have stated efforts to develop large language models within their country. So these are some of the countries I would say that from an AI perspective seem to be racing ahead, and ones that we want to ensure are thinking about artificial intelligence and its impacts in the same ways that we are as a country.
Mr. Kitchen?
Would agree completely. I think this affects the way we think about our relationship. So right now, our technology supply chain is distributed in such a way as to where there are critical vulnerabilities. Many of the key nodes are deep within Chinese sphere of influence. And where I think we're going to be going is we're going to try to build trusted technology ecosystems amongst trusted partners and allies. That the idea is that we identify, particularly Western democracies, as being the type of organizations that we can partner with so that we have mutually beneficial trade and technology relationships that are the core of future national security partnerships. That requires, however, a common purpose and a common understanding of the opportunities and the challenges. And one of the things I'm most concerned about is where many of our friends and allies are in the European Union, particularly on this issue. So my point there being that when we think about military interoperability in these types of alliances, we also need to understand that military interoperability is going to be predicated on regulatory interoperability. And that is where we have a real gap between us and some of our key friends. The European Union seems to have concluded that to build their own domestic technology base, they have to deliberately constrain and at times even decouple from the American technology base. And that will not work for our shared purposes and is going to be a real problem going forward.
Great point. Dr. Mahmoodian?
So I completely agree with other witnesses with regards to alliance. One of the things that we need to understand also that for those type of swing states that was mentioned, we need to also think about how we can align ourselves to them to make sure that their advancement in AI is also aligned to the United States, so we would have that alliance with them rather while we are ensuring that we are still the leader in this space.
Mr. Kitchen, you mentioned in written and oral testimony that on hardware, we have a strong bipartisan consensus allowing us to constrain China's advancement. There's been some suggestion, and maybe put on the Select Committee on China hat here, as we engage with Silicon Valley leaders, that while we admire the GPU export controls and the fact we're able to bring Japan and the Dutch along with us was great, and I give the Biden administration credit for that, there's loopholes whereby they're still able to access a tranche of the sort of second most advanced chips right now. I'm curious for your comments on that, and Mr. Wang, yours as well, and I recognize I run out of time here.
Yeah, so this goes to my previous point about an iterative process. I think you were referencing the October 7th rules, the export control on integrated chips. That was the first tranche, and now we're beginning to kind of optimize and tighten those controls. it's not a surprise that government and industry are doing a bit of back and forth on this. I think there is a growing recognition between both stakeholders that action is necessary, and now we're trying to find the right way forward. I have high confidence that we'll do that.
Quickly, Mr. Wang.
It is true. You can see reports that ByteDance and other Chinese companies have bought billions of dollars of GPUs in the past, it's in this year so far. So it is something that we need to be extremely careful and vigilant about.
Mr. Kana.